Okay, in this video, I want to provide some background information on Herman Melville in order to provide context for the story we're reading this week, Bartleby the Scrivener. Herman Melville is a much older author than Ursula Le Guin. He was born in 1819 and he died in 1891. Now, today, Herman Melville is considered one of the great American authors of almost like mythic proportions, largely for his epic allegory, Moby Dick. However, in his own time, he actually wasn't all that successful of a writer. In his early 20s, he had a lot of difficulty settling on a career. He went through numerous different jobs until he finally decided to work as a seaman on a whaling ship. And in that line of work, he ended up traveling the world. Now, the experiences of traveling the world and working on a ship inspired his first few novels and ended up culminating in his novel Moby Dick, which was published in 1851. Those novels were relatively successful, but his success seems to have waned after the publication of Moby Dick. And the shorter stories and novels that he wrote following that novel were really not well received. And that includes Bartleby the Scrivener, which is funny because it's now regarded as one of the great American short stories, like an absolute, tour de force. So here's some background information on Bartleby. Bartleby was first published in two parts in the November and December 1853 issues of Putnam's magazine. And it details the story of a lawyer who is confounded by a scrivener that he hires, who, initially refuses to reread the copy that he's written. He then refuses to run errands, and finally he refuses to work at all. Now, a scrivener is someone who professionally writes copy or transcribes it. And prior to the invention of copy machines, lawyers, bankers, and other kinds of institutions would hire scriveners to copy out important documents longhand so that they could have extra copies of it. Now, when Bartleby the Scrivener first came out, readers found it really confusing, and I have to be honest, I found it really confusing as well, and I think it's meant to just be confusing. The short story explores some pretty profound themes like exile and loss, issues of free will, and the impossibility of absolutes in a world that's really a lot more kind of ambiguous and relative. Um, Now, Melville offers kind of a central mystery in this story in the character of Bartleby, and some questions that people have asked are really just, who is Bartleby, and what's the significance of his, repeated statement that he prefers not to, of the fact that he's so alone and so lonely, and ultimately of his unexplained withdrawal of his labor. Um, Literary scholars have offered several different ways to account for Bartleby. Some see the story as a parable about mankind, in particular, a parable in which Bartleby and maybe the lawyer represent, mankind as essentially unfree. Um, Other literary historians have seen the lawyer narrator and Bartleby as actually split personalities, perhaps of someone who's suffering some kind of a psychotic break. And then others have seen the story as a criticism of Wall Street as essentially murderous to the human spirit and its obsession with profitability. But it seems more obvious to me, regardless of how one reads Bartleby, that Melville wants his readers to be confused, and possibly as sort of confused as the lawyer is confused. So, given that, I think that we should pay attention to two issues in the story. The first is how and why the narrator is confused. I want you to pay attention to the narrator's differing reactions. What happens to the narrator and to us as we confront a character that ultimately refuses to be understood. And the second issue is a question that I guess I would pose for us as readers. Why is it that we as readers and as people want characters and other people to be legible? That is, why do we want them to be understood? And ultimately, what's the consequence of a character or of a person essentially refusing to behave in ways that are readable or easily comprehensible? All right, keep those questions in mind. I will look forward to talking with you on the discussion board about these two stories. Thank you.